All right, what's up guys? My name is Dylan Johnson. If you have no clue who I am, I wholesale real estate. I've been doing that since the age of 17. And since then I've scaled my business all the way up until 6 figures a month consistently by hiring a sales team, placing acquisitions reps, placing dispositions reps. And now I really only manage the business, oversee the operation, and work about 2 to 3 hours a day. So in the next 10 minutes, I want to do a completely raw, completely uncut video of how I would guide a beginner of how to get into the business model. So treat this video just like a one-to-one call, right? If you were on a phone call with me and you were a complete beginner and you just truly wanted my honest help on how you would get started in the business in 2026, this is the exact advice I would give you. So just pay attention. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section down below. I'll be sure to answer them. And yeah, we could just get straight into it from here. So the first thing you need to know when you're a complete beginner is that the beginning is going to be extremely fucking complicated. You're getting into an industry like real estate where everything is known to be somewhat complex, right? I'm not saying it is somewhat complex, but it's seemingly complex. So in the beginning, you're going to be very overwhelmed with the amount of material you're going to need to learn. What you need to do is simplify into 3 sections. Those sections are going to be acquisitions, dispositions, and transactional coordination. As a beginner, the only thing you are going to need to focus on is acquisitions. Acquisitions is essentially the process of the business in finding the sellers and finding the deals. Because obviously, if you don't know what wholesale real estate is in the first place, we find sellers, get them under contract, and then assign the rights to our purchase and sale agreement with that seller to a buyer for what's called an assignment fee. So if we find a property and we are able to get it under contract for $100,000, we then have the right to assign that contract to an end buyer for $110,000 and keep that $10,000 fee in between. So obviously breaking it into sections, acquisitions would be finding the seller. Now without a seller, and without any acquisitions department, your business will not be a business. There's no opportunity being made, there's no leads being generated, and without it, you are not going to have a business at all. So this is the most important sector to focus in on in the beginning. Now, you may ask, how do you even focus in on this in the first place? What are the first steps in getting good? What I always tell beginners is it highly depends on your goals. What do you want out of the business in the first place? If you're somebody who's starting with hundreds of thousands of dollars of capital and you're just looking to get into a new business model, then no, it's not going to make sense for you to sit on the phone all day and talk to sellers and try and get better at your sales skills. That's a low leverage task for you because you obviously already have money. You can outsource it. You can spend more money on better leads, hire acquisitions reps that are already trained. But if you are a complete beginner, don't have a lot of money, and you're just looking to get into the business to make your first like $20,000, $30,000 a month, then yeah, it makes a lot of sense to first hop on the phone, start getting used to the sales process, and take the time to genuinely learn how to talk to sellers. Even if you want to scale the business to the point where you aren't truly doing the sales yourself, you need to still know how to sell. The reason being is because you're not going to be able to delegate those skills to somebody if you haven't had firsthand experience. I didn't delegate any sales role in my business up until $50,000 a month, simply because I didn't trust anybody in order to give the business enough attention that it truly desired, especially in its infancy stage. You as the owner operator, the person who's taking all the risk, the person who's taking all of the time out of their day to make this shit work, is ultimately going to be the person who cares the most about the business. So if you're putting someone else in the position of highest leverage where they're doing all of the sales and they're managing all of the sales of your company, and they don't truly care about the business because they're only getting paid on percentage and they're not really that, financially invested into it, then how can you expect to get a crazy result, especially if you do not know how to properly delegate and train them, accordingly. So that's my philosophy behind it. Always make sure you are someone who is very good at sales and very good at the actual sales aspect of real estate before you start delegating out and before you start implementing sales reps and all of that. Now, the second thing I want you to do once you start learning the sales process of the business is just gradually learn the key terms. Start learning how to genuinely understand how a deal is structured. And what I even mean by this is start understanding what the numbers look like. What is ARV? How do you underwrite a property? How do you find comps? How many comps are needed in order to accurately determine an ARV? How do we determine our max allowable offer to the seller? All of these things need to be learned in the infancy stage of your wholesale career, or else you're just going to slowly build bad habits and you're not going to really understand anything at the end of the day. Remember, there's no business without a good acquisitions department, and in order for you to have a good acquisitions department, you are going to need to have the ability to underwrite and close good deals. The only way to be able to underwrite and close good deals is by obviously knowing how to run your numbers. How do you start running your numbers? Like, what does that even mean, right? Open sites like Zillow. And basically what you're trying to do when you're underwriting a property is you're trying to determine the potential of the deal. So let's say we have a property, right? As of right now, the way it sits, it is in shitty condition. It needs a full rehab, like kitchen is torn up, plumbing needs to be repaired, electric needs to be repaired, it's vacant right now. All of these things are making the property need a lot of work. Let's say we got a contractor out there, or we got a buyer opinion, and they said that it needs $60,000 in repairs in order to get it up to market standard, which would be like, you know, the gray floors, the painted walls, the nice fixtures, all of that. What we are trying to determine when we are underwriting is what will the final product yield the investor. So if we go on market and we look at our comparatives, meaning the sold properties in the area, and we figure out that similar style houses fully fixed up are selling for $200,000, that means we can safely assume that the ARV after repair value of the property would be $200,000. Once we determine that number, we would basically times that by 0.7. That 30% of margin covers the buyer's spread, covers their closing costs, covers their title fees, and covers all of their margin in the deal. From there, we would subtract the repair costs. So currently we are at about $80,000. 200 times 0.7 is 140, minus 60, we're at 80,000. And then we would also need to subtract our assignment fee that we would be getting as a wholesaler. So $80,000 minus $10,000, that's a traditional assignment fee, would put us at $70,000, and that would be our max allowable offer to the seller. That's the basics of underwriting. That's how the structure is. You need to be able to find the numbers that make sense for the investor so that you can accurately lock up the property and so that you can actually make money off the deal. Because a lot of beginner wholesalers, they start off by just trying to lock everybody up. What this leads to is, one, terrible rep for wholesalers, because you have all these people that have no experience locking up a bunch of deals and not knowing what the fuck they're doing. But what this secondly does is it can even worsen sellers' positions, right? If you have someone that's actually in distress, meaning they need to sell their house, they're in financial troubles, all you're doing by locking them up as an inexperienced wholesaler and as someone that doesn't know how to run their numbers properly, you're just wasting their time. So who knows what that could probably do to them, right? They could lose their house, they could lose out on a lot of money, they could, not be able to afford something that they needed to afford. You don't want to waste people's time, especially if they're in distress. So make sure as a beginner you spend time properly learning how to underwrite. Now that you know the sales process, so how to talk to a seller, how does the sales process work, what questions do I need to ask, how do I find the seller, and now that you know how to underwrite, you need to learn the first or the final part of acquisition, which is marketing. Marketing is a very subjective topic. And what I mean by this is it varies very much based on your situation, right? Obviously, if you have more money, less time to spend on the business, you're gonna approach marketing in a different way than somebody who has all the time in the world, but low budget, right? So there's 4 different types of marketing that I really recommend nowadays. There's running SMS, so texting a list of motivated or potentially motivated sellers, and then weeding through those to get the actual leads, so doing your acquisitions process. Number 2, hiring VAs, so basically they will cold call those lists and pre-qualify the leads for you and then put them in your pipeline, and then you'll take them over from there. And then there's running Facebook ads and running Google ads. Those are the 4 types that I would recommend. Personally, at the point where my business is, I'm currently only running Google ads. The reason being is because I am trying to position myself and position my marketing in a place so I can scale the highest. And the best marketing for that by far is Google ads. But let's say you're somebody who only has $1,000, $2,000 a month to invest into your marketing, but you have 5, 6, 7 to 8 hours a day to work on your business. I would probably recommend SMS simply because it's the lowest cost per deal and labor is heavily rewarded. So if you're somebody who's able to work through those shitty leads and talk to the unqualified leads in order to get to the good ones, then your labor is going to pay off and you're going to end up getting cheaper cost per deals. So it's all subjective. You need to do your research and you need to understand what marketing best fits you. For, I'd say 75% of beginners, I would recommend SMS. but only with the right softwares. I'm not going to get into this too much in this video because I would be able to drag this out for like hours. But if you have any questions on marketing, I have a video posted on my YouTube channel about marketing and like the basics of it. Also, if you have any other questions, you can also just DM me on Instagram. As far as SMS goes, don't overpay for your SMS. That's all I'm going to say. My guys who are working with me spend about $800 a month. That gets them all their texting, all of their A2P, all of their data, everything included. And I see people paying the same or more for less texts, no data, no CRM, and no A2P. So if you're somebody who's overpaying for SMS, just cancel your subscription and hit me up. I'll be able to help you out. I'll guide you in the right direction. Once you figure out your marketing and once you find a suitable marketing source for you and your budget and your time, what I want you to do from there is slowly start to integrate the back-end processes of the business, right? So, but at this point, you're probably going to be about a month in. In a month in, you're going to be confident on the phone, you're going to know how to run your numbers, and you're going to know what type of marketing you want to do. Great. Now what you need to do is actually implement that marketing. So slowly start building out the back end, build out a CRM. What a CRM does is it's going to store all of your leads. And every single lead that is generated from your marketing needs to be stored in your CRM so that you never waste out on any opportunity. Next, what you're going to need to do is stay on top of that CRM every single day. You never want a lead to go to waste. That is the worst thing you can do in the business, because every single lead has the potential to be 10, 20, even like upwards of $100,000, right? So if you let that one lead go to waste that had the potential to convert, you're literally missing out on a month's worth of income, right? I've had multiple instances where leads got lost in follow-up, and I call the seller back a couple months later thinking, oh shit, we never followed up with this guy, and he ended up selling to somebody else, and it ended up being another wholesaler, and they made 10, 20, 30 grand on a deal when that easily could have been ours if we just would have followed up with them properly. So in the beginning, just make sure everything's set up and structured and organized in a way where you can truly understand how your system works and how you can follow it basically to a T. Next, what you want to do is begin learning what dispositions and transactional coordination actually looks like. Before this point, understand the basics of it, like understand the definition, but don't put too much emphasis on it, right? Because like I said, you need to focus all of your brain power and all of your cognitive function in the beginning and all of your energy into acquisitions, because that's what's going to drive your business. But in order to actually capitalize on that opportunity and make money out of it, you need to know dispositions and you need to know transactional coordination. But these two things are extremely easy to do as long as you do the acquisitions process right. If you think about it, buyers are everywhere. There's always going to be someone willing to make $20,000 to $30,000 off of a deal that you found them. They didn't have to spend any money in marketing. All they have to do is come to you, walk the property, and if it actually works out and you actually ran your numbers properly, why would they not buy it, right? So dispositions is the easiest thing in the fucking world. What dispositions actually is it's assigning that purchase and sale that you got with the seller to a cash buyer. There are multiple ways to find cash buyers. I also have a YouTube video on that. You could use Facebook, you could JV with people, you could use realtors, you could cold call lists, million different ways to find buyers. They're everywhere, and it shouldn't really be that hard. One tip that I'll give you guys on dispositions is you need to make sure that you're vetting your buyers properly. You don't want to work with bullshitters. You don't want to work with someone who pretends to be a buyer and ends up not actually closing on your deal and just wasting your time and wasting your money. That is probably the worst thing you can do because you're so deep into the process at that point. So just make sure the buyers that you're working with, they send you proof of funds, they send you some type of proof that they actually are who they say they are, and then move forward with working with them. Transactional coordination, this is the easiest part of the entire business, and that is because it's basically done for you. All you have to do is contact the title company or contact an attorney, and depending on either an attorney state or a title company state, they will perform the closing for you. All that is needed from you up until that point is you need to obviously submit all the documentation, the purchase and sale, the assignment, any addendums that you may have signed with the seller, and just explain to them the situation. Hey, I have this property at 123 Main Street. Here's the contract I have with the seller, and here's the contract I have with the end buyer. We are assigning this purchase and sale to the end buyer, and we'll be getting paid out an assignment fee at closing. If you need anything else from me, let me know, and I'll be sure to convey that to either the end buyer or the seller. That is the email that you basically need to write to the title company. And then from there, just follow up every couple of days. Make sure they're doing their job. Hey, any update on the status of the title? Hey, is title clear? Basically, the title process, the way it works, like very dumbed down real quick, just so you guys understand. You open title, so you send that email, order the title. They're gonna actually order the title. What that means is they're gonna check and see if there's any liens, back taxes, multiple owners, anything like that on the title that would be preventing the closing. Once the title's clear, meaning it's actually like clear to close, and once the wire is submitted, the deed would transfer over to the buyer. They'll schedule a closing, get funding lined up, and actually close on the property. It's very simple. The title company will know exactly what they're doing. In order to actually find a title company or an attorney, just search up the area that you're working in, space title company, and just call them up and just say, hey, are you guys familiar with working with wholesalers? If they say yes, good. You're good to work with them. Just make sure they sound nice on the phone. If they say no, just find another one. Title companies are extremely replaceable. You don't need to think that you need to work with just one. There's literally millions of them out there. And finally, right, I just went over how to get into wholesaling with acquisitions, how to learn the sales process, underwriting, marketing, and dispositions and transactional coordination. Next, I just want to talk about the timeline of actually seeing results. Your first 30 days will be basically your learning phase. Some people drag this out for way too long. Cold calling FISBOs, doing mock calls, practicing, watching YouTube videos. If you're doing all of that shit for more than like a month, you're just wasting your time and you're spinning your gears. I've talked to so many people where they're like, yeah, I've been like learning about the business model for like 6 months, but I haven't really called anybody yet. You're not doing anything with that. You're not actually putting in any work. You're not getting anywhere. You're basically a beginner at that point. You just have 6 months of knowledge, which does nothing. So you need to get past that phase as soon as possible. There's no like progress marker to go off of when you're ready. It's really just like throwing yourself off the deep end and just forcing yourself to get out there and start marketing and start taking risks and just fail. Like this is a business, and business in general, like you have to fail to learn. You have to make these mistakes. You have to talk to people wrong. You have to fuck up acquisitions calls. You have to fuck up your numbers in order to learn from it. So just don't be afraid to actually get started and actually start implementing, because that's ultimately what's going to drive you to success. And the sooner you do it, the sooner you're actually going to start closing deals and get to where you want to be. The timeline that I set out for all beginners is you'll probably be able to close your first deal within 150 to 180 days without guidance. And that's completely self-instructed, failing by yourself, not really knowing what you're doing, self-taught, not investing in any mentorships, anything like that. I would say about 6 months. It took me personally 7.5 months to close my first deal, and I made $20,000 off of it. It took me a long time because I was doing a lot of the wrong marketing styles. I was jumping between SMS and cold calling and ads, and I was just kind of fucking it up. But yeah, right about 6 months is where I would put the timeline to close your first deal if you're completely self-instructed. With that, the average assignment fee is anywhere between $14,000 to $25,000. Across the board right now, I'm running Google ads and my average assignment fee is about 17 grand. So take that as you will. And yeah, that's basically it as far as getting into wholesaling. Like, the one thing about wholesaling is it's a extremely simple model. You don't need to overcomplicate it. There's not many intricate details that you need to know, but it is not easy. It is a hard business. You need to be ruthless. You need to be willing to show up every single day. You need to have discipline. You need to have conviction, and you need to be someone who's willing to just kind of go all in. And honestly, that same approach is the same thing with any other business, right? Because if you approach business in any other way and you half-ass it, you're not going to get anywhere. And it's especially like that in wholesaling because there's so many different things to learn and there's so many different things to do. But it is such a high-ticket industry to where if you do master it and you do actually get your business to the point where you want it to be, the reward is astronomical. Not only do you gain the ability to make $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 a month by just wholesaling, you're also understanding the back end of how flipping works, how development works, how building works. You're learning all of these different avenues of real estate, and that's what can really evolve your income. Like, trust me guys, if I wanted to just make $5,000, $6,000, to $10,000 a month online, realistically, I would probably just be doing sales because that's the easiest way to make 5 to 6 grand a month online. But the thing is you're capped at that number for so long. With wholesaling, yeah, it did take me a couple months to see results, but my first month where I actually made money, I made 20 grand. And then from there, I was doing anywhere between 10 to 40 grand a month consistently. Fast forward to today, I'm doing about, consistently 90 to 120 a month. And that's just wholesaling, right? If I start implementing flips, if I start implementing development deals, my business partner does like 3 to 4 flips a month and he's making, 150 to 250 grand a month. These avenues of real estate are what really have the ability to make you rich. And that's the thing that separates the real estate industry from literally anything else, simply because it just has so many different avenues. There's so many different ways to just find success and to capitalize on the same exact skill set. It all comes down to finding a good deal. If you can find a good deal, which is the number one skill in wholesaling, acquisitions. Remember I was talking about how it's the most important part of a wholesaling business? That's also the most important part of a real estate business, real estate investment firm, hedge fund, everything. So it opens up so many more doors to know just how to find a deal and how to structure a deal and how to underwrite it. That's why wholesaling is the best business model to get into. And that's why I have so much conviction into it. And if I was to start over and if I was to try and do anything else with my time and put my effort into anything else, 100% of the time, it would be wholesale. But anyways, guys, I'm gonna wrap the video up here. That's probably a little bit more than 10 minutes. I have no clue. Hopefully there's not that many cuts in this video. I don't think I fucked up that many times. But yeah, if you guys have any questions, leave them down below. As always, if you guys want to apply to work one-to-one with me and Hunter, where we'll help you get into the business model, get you your first deal closed with a guarantee, and then also set up all of the sales infrastructure, marketing systems, and anything else you could possibly need to scale up to 50 grand a month and above, just apply down below. It'll be the first thing in the description. And yeah, that's basically going to be it. Make sure to leave a like, leave a sub. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.